Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
Thousands of U.S. flights were canceled over the weekend, and now American Airlines has canceled 250 more. The company says it's due to bad weather and staffing shortages. That's after a lot of employees left the airlines during the slump the industry faced because of the pandemic. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the story.
Frustrated, stranded, but hopeful, thousands of U.S. travelers are not able to get to their destinations. It comes as major carrier American cancels another 250 flights on Monday. That's on top of about 2,000 flights over the weekend.
I can't control it, so it's out of my control. You know, I'm sure it's terrible for a lot of people. They have places to be and family to be with, and as do I. I have to go to work tomorrow, so you know, hope for the best.
It's annoying because it wasn't just American, it was Southwest a couple weeks ago. So yeah, they're canceling up until we have to stay here. So it kind of leaves us stranded for a while.
One major factor is the wind. Larger gusts last week slowed arrival rates at American's busy hub in Dallas-Fort Worth. American COO David Seymour told employees their staffing begins to run tight as crew members end up out of their regular flight sequences. The airline industry is very interdependent, leading to delays spreading as federal law prohibits pilots from flying too many hours. But staffing shortages are another big factor. Last year, American Airlines and others urged thousands of workers to retire early. That was when air travel hit a low during the pandemic. And now airlines are short-staffed as travel is recovering quickly. Some ask, what about the holidays? Cancellations are raising concerns as an expected busy holiday season approaches. The flight cancellations signal traveling this holiday season could be tricky, and the cancellations are sure to take a toll on Americans' bottom line. Southwest Airlines similarly canceled over 2,000 flights last month. The airline said it cost them $75 million. Though one thing the FAA and Southwest said is not causing the cancellations is the vaccine mandate. Nevertheless, the demand keeps rising. Except for some brief holiday weekend peaks, last week was the busiest week for airlines since the pandemic began. And American says it canceled some of its flights proactively so it could rebook passengers and minimize inconvenience. And it says issues should start being resolved by Monday. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Barclays boss Jes Staley has stepped down following an investigation into his ties with disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Financial regulators have been investigating whether links between the two were closer than first thought. Early last year, Staley admitted they remained in contact several years after Epstein's conviction for sex offenses with minors in 2008. NTD's Malcolm Hudson has this report.
Barclays chief executive Jes Staley has quit after an investigation into his links with Jeffrey Epstein. Regulators have been probing whether the relationship between the Barclays boss and the convicted sex offender was closer than first thought. The Financial Conduct Authority and the Prudential Regulatory Authority began their investigation after getting a cache of emails between the two men from Staley's former employer. Epstein was a client at JP Morgan when Staley started working for the bank in 2000. The two maintained a relationship until Staley left in 2013, after which he says their relationship tapered off quite significantly. But Epstein was convicted of sex offences with minors in 2008, raising questions as to why Staley continued the relationship for several years. It is also known that Staley visited Epstein's private island in 2015, months before taking over as Barclays' CEO. Barclays said, in light of the conclusions and Staley's intention to contest them, the board and Staley have agreed he will step down. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Shanghai Disneyland is now closed indefinitely as of Monday. That's due to a positive case discovered in the park over the weekend. Meanwhile, the virus may have even infiltrated the Chinese Communist Party's headquarters in Beijing. NTD's Evelyn Lee has more.
Shanghai Disneyland virus tested all 33,000 of its visitors Sunday evening. That's after authorities discovered an individual carrying the Chinese Communist Party virus that causes COVID-19 had visited the park. For hours, tens of thousands of families were stuck inside the theme park. They weren't allowed to leave until negative test results came back. And the resort was also surrounded by virus prevention personnel. China follows what it calls a zero-case policy when it comes to its approach to handling the pandemic. That means that when just one confirmed case is found, everyone in the area will be put under strict quarantine or lockdown or made to get tested. Unlike China, many other countries have instead loosened their restrictions and don't employ such harsh measures. But in Shanghai, Disneyland is now closed until further notice. A new U.S. intelligence report reveals new details about the government's stance on the pandemic. It says more intelligence agencies support the view of the pandemic beginning naturally than the possibility of it leaking from a lab. But due to a lack of key information, no theory can currently be proven. According to the report, if the virus did come from a lab, it was likely an accident that caused the leak, and that researchers in the Wuhan lab probably were not aware of its existence at the time. Earlier this year, the World Health Organization criticized Beijing for withholding key data collected in the early days of the pandemic in Wuhan. What's more, the new report says Beijing will likely continue blocking a global investigation into the virus's origin. In the conclusion of the report, U.S. intelligence agencies say they may never be able to identify the origins of COVID-19.
November 2nd is Election Day for state and local government. One county in Colorado is taking measures to ensure all votes are secure.
Tuesday's off-year elections feature a host of local contests for mayor, city council, and school board in communities across the country. After the 2020 presidential election and claims of fraud, one city in Jefferson County, Colorado, intends to prove their system works and is secure. In the city of Golden, election officials are busy sorting thousands of mail ballots daily.
So this is where we go out and collect ballots, we bring them back here to our secure facility, and we've got teams of bipartisan judges doing everything from opening those ballots to counting them.
They say there are numerous safeguards in place to ensure that people casting mail ballots are who they say they are and only vote once.
So our signature verification judges go through extensive training that includes an FBI handwriting expert who gives them all they need to know about how to check signatures and make sure that they do match. And then we're regularly auditing our signature verification folks.
In August, an alleged security breach in Mesa County caused a feud among Colorado voting officials.
Kyle Rittenhouse is the teenager who shot and killed 2 men and injured another during last summer's protests in Wisconsin. His trial started and jury selection is underway. He's facing several charges, including homicide and attempted homicide. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
Protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin began last year after a white police officer shot a black man, leaving him paralyzed. Kyle Rittenhouse, who is now 18 years old, went to these protests armed with an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. During a confrontation, he shot 3 men, killing 2 and injuring another. Rittenhouse was charged with several crimes. Jury selection started today.
Those who are picked for this jury will be in the front row seat to see exactly what happened and make a rational decision based on that. And anybody who's not on board with deciding strictly on the evidence needs to tell us that.
Rittenhouse says he went to the Wisconsin protest to help protect businesses. Prosecutors are expected to argue that Rittenhouse was looking for violent conflict, while the defense is expected to say Rittenhouse was acting in self-defense. More than a dozen potential jurors have been excused from the trial. Lawyers on both sides are probing potential jurors for their political leanings and perceived biases. If convicted for first-degree intentional homicide, Rittenhouse could face life in prison. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Thousands of people marched through central London on Saturday, protesting against vaccine passports and the government's winter COVID Plan B. With vaccine passports already being rolled out in Wales and Scotland, many protesters were concerned about the loss of freedoms they may bring. NTD's Joy Dogood tells us more.
Thousands of people marched in central London on Saturday to protest against the potential introduction of vaccine passports as part of the government's winter COVID Plan B. Protesters marched through Piccadilly Circus calling for medical freedom. Microbiologist Catherine Pritchard said she is against vaccine passports because they will restrain freedoms.
As a microbiologist and a person who's been vaccinated many, many times and travelled all over the world having things like yellow fever, typhoid, hepatitis and whatever, I've taken all my jabs. But this jab is a bit different, and I'm deeply concerned that it's been rolled out whilst it was in a trial phase and has been rolled out in such magnitude and to so many people. We haven't had a time to evaluate its efficacy and its safety.
Pritchard is also concerned over the government's decision to give vaccines to healthy children, as the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation doesn't recommend this.
The decision was based on depression caused by children missing school. Apparently the calculation was that children would save 15 minutes in school if they have that vaccine, and for that alone, that risk is too massive to have a jab to save you 15 minutes of extra schooling over the coming winter.
Fifi is a member of an organisation called A Stand in the Park, started in Australia to celebrate freedom and fairness.
We're marching for medical freedom specifically for this. Obviously, we've got the threat of vaccine passports being rolled out. We've seen them actually being rolled out in Wales now. So obviously, we're massively opposed to that.
Wayne Peacher is from Norwich. He said he's joined similar protests before because he feels information is being controlled.
Well, because the mainstream media is totally controlled, the public do not get to hear about the information. What they get are just fabrications, distortions and lies, basically.
The protest was organised by the Together Declaration, an alliance of more than 200 organisations, business groups, campaigners and professionals who are concerned about the introduction of vaccine passports. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
The Outside Lands Festival concluded its annual music show in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park over the weekend. But it seems the show isn't quite over yet. The City Ethics Committee released a report saying the festival may have been using a department as a middleman to give tickets to city officials. We hear more from NTD's David Lamb.
Outside Lands is a large music festival that draws in tens of thousands of people each year. Tickets can range from $165 to nearly $900 for the 3-day event. It was canceled last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and attendees were required to show proof of vaccine or negative test results this year. The event brings in modern acts such as Nelly, Childish Gambino, and Lil Wayne. The performance caused controversy in the city government recently. In September, the San Francisco Ethics Commission reported that city officials received over 1,400 free tickets to Outside Lands Music Festival from 2015 to 2019. The tickets were valued at approximately $315,000. The Ethics Commission stated that this practice of gift-giving is problematic because in order to prevent preferential treatment, the festival organizer, Another Planet Entertainment, is restricted from giving free tickets to city officials. But the city's Recreation and Park Department is able to. This is part of the Commission's efforts to evaluate fair practices among organizations. The Commission suggested new laws calling for more transparency and conduct on gift giving. The Recreation and Parks Department did not respond to requests for comment. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Did the Biden administration break an important alliance between France and Australia? Nullifying the submarine deal between the two countries may indirectly benefit the Chinese regime, according to a French expert. NTD's David Vivas has more from Paris.
French President Emmanuel Macron on Sunday said that Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison lied to the French government over the cancellation of a submarines contract.
You have to respect allies and partners, and it was not the case with this deal. And I think this is detrimental to the reputation of your country and your prime minister.
The €30 billion contract was cancelled by the Australian government on September 15th in favour of a new pact between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States, also known as AUKUS. The AUKUS security alliance would allow Australia to build nuclear-powered submarines for the first time, with technology from the US. The scrapped deal with France would have provided Australia with 12 conventional submarines, which Morrison said no longer meet his country's needs. But the broken deal isn't just a financial loss for France. It could also mean the end of an alliance that would have lasted a decade between France and Australia against a mutual opponent, China. Editorialist Mathieu Sylvain says the US move might prevent France from stepping up against Beijing.
Economic losses are a big deal for France, but this contract also represented the starting point of a new strategic alliance against China. France remains humiliated and isolated, and I think the Chinese regime benefits from this broken deal.
The French Minister of the Armed Forces said on October 12th that France has a role to play in the South China Sea, including enforcing the rule of law against China's move in the region. Sylvain says the deal between France and Australia had a significant impact, as France would have shared military technology, which implies deep ties. Whereas President Biden's promises of selling nuclear submarines raises new concerns.
US and Australia cooperation was at the highest point it could reach, be it diplomatically, economically, or militarily. The AUKUS alliance might only be an advertisement that came after the Afghan defeat for the US, but to transfer a civilian nuclear technology to a country that has no nuclear industry brings a lot of issues and challenges.
One of these issues is the nuclear proliferation in the region. Last week, conservative candidates in the South Korea presidential primaries have called on the United States to redeploy tactical nuclear weapons in the Korea Peninsula. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to catch all of our programs on TV. NTD Evening News is on every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Find your local NTD channel at ntd.com/TV.